Hello, my name is Joshua Gilliland,
And I'm Matthew Sciarrino.
and we are here to talk about something of traditional geekdom, the 50th anniversary of Doctor Who. Let's talk about legal issues in Doctor Who. And, I know you've been, you watched everything from 2005 forward. I know you watched Trial of a Time Lord and some other classics. But what legal issues jump out to you when it comes to Doctor Who?
Greatest law, I guess, for the Time Lords is dealing with how much interaction and how much they're able to change the timeline continuum. And I think that, law seems to permeate all of the series. In the new series, they found themselves at one point back in with Hitler, and do they kill Hitler? Or is that one of the events of time that just cannot be changed? So, I think that's the crux of the legal issue is almost like the Prime Directive on Star Trek. How much influence can we give? How much future technology can we give? How much contact can we have with the new races or even earlier Earth incarnations?
Well, you also get the factor from the three doctors, in which they said the first law, even though the Trial of the Time Lord also says there's a different first law, but the original first law was not crossing your own timeline, which they violated in the three doctors because of Omega, so they were willing to violate their own law there. When you look at the comic book series for the 50th Prisoners of Time, fun story where you have Adam from the Ninth Doctor, who, the guy who had the hole in his head to suck in information. Very, fascinating story with him, kidnapping all the companions at the same, simultaneously from all the different versions of the Doctor. And how to fight that and how to deal with that. So, they flirted with that a couple times. But one of the issues... go on.
I was going to say, even with the three doctors that you bring up, which I watched on your recommendation, that the fact that, yes, their most important law, they ended up violating because of the situation where if they didn't violate it, they would be entirely wiped out. And that brings a lot of relevant discussion even, to the current status of debate sometimes in our country in dealing with, we need to protect the Constitution, and I'm a very strict loyalist to the Constitution. But there is arguments that are said and raised at certain times, are we going to let our strict adherence sometimes bring us to our own destruction? And that balancing is incredibly difficult in dealing with a lot of the issues involved in terrorism today.
Horrifically complicated, and ironically, well, not ironically, but in our history, it comes up all the time. From the Civil War, because Lincoln had to suspend the writ of habeas corpus in order to keep the country together, in which the Supreme Court, after the war, said he should not have done, but they didn't say it during the war. You then get to the Sedition Acts that came about in 1917, during the First World War that nobody liked. And even I'm reading a book right now called The Pacific Crucible about the early days of World War II.
And the Japanese internment. Yeah.
But the Navy, dealing with all the bureaucracy and paying for things and just getting stuff done, they, because of the way the bureaucracy was at the time, and it's probably worse today, people just started exercising authority to go out and, I don't care if you have to spend $300,000 or $3 million, just do it, get it done, and we'll deal with it afterwards. And that's what happens when, free countries or free societies go to war, because we're generally not designed for it.
Right.
So it gets, then the issue is after the war, ratcheting back. Right now it's a little weird because we can't perpetually have a war on terror. It's a very different...
Hopefully not.
Yeah, hopefully not. I do think we'll probably be in it for 50 years, just as we were with the Cold War, because we're fighting an ideology. but it's a different creature because we're not fighting a nation. It's nation states supporting terrorism, and it's a very different creature. So, which is supposed to confuse us because it's, we're trying to find out what's the right path. I won't go into my views on that, but that's one of the challenges we have. So let's go back to who. Now, in the stories that we've seen, humanity was not the first species to evolve on Earth. So, property type question for you. What race do you think would have the better ownership claim to the planet and existing countries from the Doctor Who universe?
Well, I guess the original Aborigine people were the Silurians and their Sea Devil cousins, and they were a reptilian race that kind of was there at the beginnings of Homo sapiens and was pushed to live in the interiors of the Earth by those same Homo sapiens that they initially had helped. And so they would clearly have a legitimate claim to return back to the surface.
Yeah, and part of the reason they go underground is the Earth becomes uninhabitable during because of the asteroid strike, or if it's because of Earth shock, Adric and the ship blowing up, killing all the dinosaurs, depending on how geeky you are looking at it. But it is fascinating to go just on property law. Would the original owners have the better claim, or those who have used the planet and been the current owners and done the improvements, would they be the ones who are technically the current owners? Or do you end up with a weird joint custody situation because, in theory, reptilians would want to live in parts of the planet where humans could not?
Right. There clearly could be a shared ownership if they would actually spend the time to talk about it. But unfortunately, I'm sure it would end up being a typical scenario in human history, which is that the strength of the particular race will determine who actually had the right, and unfortunately, as was depending on one's vantage point, and in which Aborigines case you want to take, you clearly make the case that their rights were trampled upon, but force sometimes does make right.
Exactly. Yeah.
At least in the hindsight of writing that history, since you're the one that's in control of writing that history. Yeah.
Well, when you're the victor, go to the spoils of the history books. So let's talk about companions. And one of my criticisms over the recent specials that they did, like last year or within the past 2 years, they did a special about Doctor Who companions, focusing exclusively on post-2005, ignoring everyone from 1963 going forward. So
except for Sarah. Sarah gets a little bit of street cred, I guess, as far as but she's the only one, and but part of that is as I've seen some of the companions in the older episodes, I don't think they had that same level. Some of them, at least, or at least as far as what the writers gave them to say, they didn't seem as independent as the latter companions, which I think had their own thoughts and way of doing things, whereas some of the other ones they really made them seem really dumb.
Yeah, I'm quite fond of Jamie, who was. I read one article that said he probably had the same amount of screen time, if not more, than Sarah Jane. Because he was the second Doctor's companion and truly a wingman best friend, and was very long-lasting throughout the second.
And I think the important part about that was he was a he.
Yep.
And I think that gave them, they made him more of an equal as far as a true companion, whereas when they were dealing with the female companions, they did, especially in the 60s and 70s, begin to assert their own opinions a little bit more, but you could tell that they were doing it slowly and gently as to not offend anyone.
Well, look how successful, or more appropriately, not successful Elizabeth Shaw was, the third Doctor's first companion, who was supposed to be, brilliant scientist who got fed up with being, told to hand the Doctor, mixing sticks and formulas, and went off on her own. And I mean, that was probably in part because of audience reaction to her, and which is
right.
But you then had, I believe Ridley Scott did work on the show at that point in time, which is why Prometheus has an Elizabeth Shaw in it. So, which, nice to see that come full circle. But Brigadier, I think, is also an important character who did show independence and strength for both the second Doctor, a ton in the third, a couple times in the fourth. I think he was with the fifth once or twice. I don't think he had any appearances with the sixth Doctor, but then he did with the seventh. So again, another important character. I would like to see with the next Doctor, characters like Jamie and the Brigadier again, because we've seen a lot of borderline, love interest, female companions. And, that just seems a little weird all the time. It'd be nice to actually have somebody who's just a buddy, a wingman on the adventure.
And I could see that maybe happening with the latest incarnation of the Doctor, because, the original companion seems to stay around for a little bit so that there's a natural transformation to the new Doctor, but they don't really stay with the new Doctors all that long. So that next companion, I have a feeling, will be the next big, episode. Maybe that'll be, I don't think it'll make the Christmas episode because unless he has it already done and he hasn't told anyone about it. So I got to think that the next season will bring in who that next companion might be.
Yeah, I agree with you there. But I do think we'll have Clara for probably another season, or at least half of one. Right, and
maybe it'll be the Christmas episode next year that the new companion comes in.
Yeah, and I do like Clara. I think I like the character, and I hope we get to have her around for a bit. In the modern era, I've been very fond of Catherine Tate's Donna Noble, because I thought she was the most dynamic, changed the most out of all of them, and in a tragic end to her character. Really liked the grandfather element as well. And
I thought the grandfather was spectacular. He's just such a good actor and just so real. I mean, just so real. And I would have liked to seen her interaction with the Matt Smith Doctor.
Mm-hmm.
Would have been very interesting to see because they both have an element of that real sarcastic humor to them, and it would have been funny to see their chemistry. I mean, I of the modern era, I think I'm with the masses in loving the Rose character just because her transformation from a London type valley girl to really a force was interesting to see, and I'm glad she's coming back for this episode, and I'm really curious as to what role she's going to be playing in the Time War.
Yeah, because there are a couple of theories floating around because she's not wearing an outfit that she had on during the David Tennant years. We got the glowing eyes like Bad Wolf Rose from taking the TARDIS from present day, back to the 50th century or whatever for the parting of the ways. So will be fun to see what they do with that. And I thought Rose was a little too needy, and I did like her evolution, but I still prefer Donna. That's just because I thought Catherine Tate was far more dynamic.
I'm a little poisoned towards Donna because I hated her character in The Office, in the American edition of The Office when she came in as the manager from Florida. I really disliked her, and so when I saw that and again, I was coming into it late, so I didn't know that she had been in Doctor Who before. I didn't like her from the beginning, but by the end, I agree with you. She was a really, really good companion.
Yeah,
and Steve Moffat really does an amazing job of killing them off and such rip at your heart. I mean, it's really sad. And for that, I think then the older incarnation of the Doctor Who's where they just kind of just went away or they got left behind. You know, it was always a real tragic element to the new series that I think was missing in the classic year Doctor Who's.
Yeah, with the exception of Earthshock when they killed Adric, because people didn't see that coming. But at that point in time, there were bless you, 4 companions. But they, Rose has a relatively happy ending, and after the Stolen Earth. You also then have Martha has a relatively happy ending as well. But, Donna's ending is quite tragic because, she becomes this very dynamic, strong, wonderful person and then is reverted back to the party girl and, just sad, to come so far and then get thrown back. Brilliantly written.
Right, because she evolved so far.
Now, I do believe that potentially with Amy Pond's character, I bet you the original story arc was she was going to be the daughter of Donna Noble. Because in the library episode, you have Donna meet a guy and fall in love in the library in that matrix. And, they kind of see each other at the end before he gets teleported away. And I can't help but wonder if Moffat was planning an arc there, for River Song. So that's just, and then ultimately Amy Pond wouldn't have existed. It would have just been River Song based from Donna Noble. So that's, can't help but wonder with 2 redheads if that was the game plan initially.
And clearly that whole aspect between Amy Pond and River and the Doctor Who theory of time not being aligned, but this mumbly jumbly ball of lines clearly is shown within that particular arc with all of them more than anything else, because you really, if you try to piece out the timeline that they're all on and where they interact and how they go, it gives you a headache.
Oh, totally. Absolutely. Now, this does raise an interesting issue on whether or not the Doctor's marriage to River is actually valid, since the marriage ceremony consisted of holding 2 ends of a bow tie and an alternate reality. Would that be a legally valid marriage? And did he get his marriage to Marilyn Monroe annulled?
See, I'm going to go with it not being valid from the beginning, so I don't think he needed to get it annulled. But it's like one of those things. He kind of like speaks of it. Oh, I'm going to get married, and he's on his way, and then he's back, and he's because it was that particular episode is not on Netflix. I found it on YouTube, but that wasn't one of the ones that I had ever seen. And then when we were talking about this last week, and you said that was going to be one of the issues we might discuss, I was like, I didn't ever see him marry Marilyn Monroe. So I went back and I found it. For some reason, that Christmas special isn't up there. It's on DVD, but it's not up there. But I found the episode and watched it, and it was very interesting the way that happened. I'm going to guess that it wasn't legal in as much as I don't know if he's a legally recognized person as a citizen of any place with the way he jumps in and out of particular times and places and countries. So I don't know. I don't know if he necessarily is of legal status to get married.
It's definitely a unique spin on illegal alien, because technically it would have been in the United States illegally in the 1950s at that Christmas party where he apparently married Marilyn Monroe if that did indeed happen off camera. So some things to think about. Now, I do think that was probably the best Christmas episode, at least Matt Smith's best Christmas episode. A lot of people also really like the Christmas Invasion, but I think those are probably the two top Christmas specials that they did. So let's talk about Unit, which we've seen a couple times now in the new generation of Doctor Who series. The Doctor keeps coming back to Earth to save it, and that's partly because it's a show written for us, so therefore most of the adventure is going to involve saving planet Earth. But does working for Unit create a special relationship which would create a duty to rescue planet Earth? And Judge, your thoughts?
I can't see him having a duty, not as a citizen of Earth, of rescuing Earth. I think it's out of his love for Earth that he will always try to, but I don't think it's any particular duty to do so. And I'm also, the unit itself is interesting even in a copyright framework, because apparently the unit of the classic years was clearly a UN-sponsored, UN chartered organization, and then apparently there was some issues with the UN not wanting to be a part of this or to use their logo, and so the name changed for what unit is, and so I'm still iffy as to whether they actually speak with the voice of the United Nations under what particular charter, or are they more of just a joint task force, or so as to their legal ability to force the Doctor to do something, I don't know if there is in the modern incarnation, whereas there was more of an argument where, especially the Doctor that was land-bound to the Earth in the classic years, that he agreed in order to work with Unit that he would help Unit. But the modern reboot, I don't think there's any duty on the Doctor other than his love for the Earth.
Yeah, and I agree with you, but I also wonder with the Voyage of the Damned, with the crashing Titanic, that when he makes the call, he does use his unit identification in order to, get Buckingham Palace evacuated. So there's, I don't know if there's still a valid employment contract or if he's still technically a member, but that is kind of an interesting, spin on it, on how they would have that.
His entire relationship with Buckingham Palace and the various queens and the various Queen Elizabeths is an amazing story in of itself. And apparently there will be a Queen Elizabeth of some sort as part of the 50th anniversary. So it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out, because they released a small another little, back to the marketing, another snippet of a moment dealing with Queen Elizabeth and teasing that particular aspect in the 50th episode. And you never know with Moffat either. Sometimes he does these teases that will have nothing to do with the particular show, just to lead people in a direction so that it keeps the show itself fresh. But it's going to be interesting to see. But yeah, no, he clearly has relationships, whether it was with the old Torchwood, the new Torchwood, and Buckingham Palace.
Yeah, my brothers joke that Moffat lies, so you don't know what's going to happen. And I do think that's kind of cool. I mean, the Disinformation Campaign, their ability to keep things secret, you can't help but want to salute them, because there are so many sci-fi fans who are pounding at the door to find out what's happening in episode 7, that they just want to blow all the surprises. And we should be able to be surprised and wait and enjoy it. So the fact that they're able to keep a lid on things, and that the only information that got out was the stuff that was publicly filmed for the 50th anniversary, God bless them. That's just good for them. And I'm sure
even the announcing of the new Doctor,
mm-hmm.
the way that was handled was masterful. You release it to everybody at the same time, and everyone, you guessed right, so you get points on that one. But the all the battles, and there was almost odds being taken as to who was going to be the next Doctor, and when he came out, it really was a treat. because yeah, just watching Twitter explode was fun. I mean, the amount of tweets trending as to who the doctor was just, it was incredibly fun. And I'm sure it's going to be that way for the 50th episode. You know, the Twitter universe is going to go crazy.
And as it should. And I mean, they've shown that they are master at doing this now. And that's just cool to see them leveraging social media and whatever NDAs they have in place and vows of secrecy. I'm like, they're doing a really good job at keeping things under control. So, God
but at the
bless
same
them.
time, giving enough snippets that the fan base just wants more.
Mhm.
And because if you do a total closed shop, I think you run a risk of people saying, yeah, you're forgetting about it. You know, there's these little snippets here and there. The way that BBC has released, you know, apps that are fun to play with. Their use of the Facebook app, their web page. The BBC web page used to be a horrible web page. They've done a great job of incorporating all of this into a very focused marketing strategy to keep people wanting more. And that's the way you really build, because people are talking about it and someone else overhears it and what are you talking about? And then they can find out a little bit about it and then they want more too. So it's really well done.
That and the entire Save the Day hashtag, I mean, wickedly clever. And the little...
But now there's a battle between the One Directioners and because apparently it's a big day in One Direction world. They're releasing something that day. So there's now a battle as to who owns the day. And I think the Whovians are winning the battle from what I'm seeing in the Twitter universe. But the fact that another group almost tried to jump on that particular date because of all of the press about that date is very interesting.
Yeah, that's probably not how you're going to win friends and influence people. That's some weird cyber squatting right there, trying to hop on if you could actually own a hashtag. But trying to commandeer and ride the coattails of somebody else's hashtag is, I mean, I understand why, but we're probably going to incur the ire of the people who started it. And God knows.
And I don't know. For all I know, One Direction had that particular date first. I mean, I don't know enough about One Direction. I do have a teenage daughter, so I know a little bit about One Direction because I have no choice. But it's funny to see the various attacks between them that I have seen on Twitter and as the One Directioners battle the Whovians.
I think they're more Whovians. I'm just going to go out on.
I think so too, especially on social. I mean, clearly the One Direction teenagers also followed all the social media stuff, but and maybe that's particular to the particular social media. Those of our generation are more on Facebook and Twitter, and if you see Facebook is very concerned because it's losing teenagers to Tumblr and Instagram and Snapchat. So maybe in the Tumblr world, the One Directioners are winning, but I'm not in the Tumblr world yet.
Yeah, I've experimented a little bit with the legal geeks on that one, but it's different. It is,
and I run a Tumblr site for my bar association, but I don't have a Tumblr site of my own, so I know how to use it, and I feel a need to know how to use all of these various sites if it becomes germane to stuff that I do. But it is clearly the favored social media group of the teens right now.
yes.
To Facebook's, and they're very concerned about that, and they're I think trying to take steps, but clearly off topic.
Clear, and they have some wickedly smart people over there. I'm sure they'll figure out a good counterpunch, but we'll see. So, to be a companion to the Doctor, they're assuming a lot of risk, which means if there were any Time Lord lawyers running around, what would a waiver look like to be a Time Lord's companion?
Well, the good thing, I guess, about the TARDIS is how big it is on the inside, because you would really need a very large waiver form or an incredibly short one. It could probably be as simple as waiving everything. and anything, and you might be able to accomplish it in a line as a good lawyer. But I don't think you could, any way, shape, or form, ever be able to come up with all of the possible situations that could come upon you as a companion. And you think of the law of choices and which law controls, and the law of nations, and you add that on top of it as they go from nation to nation, and add on top of that universe to universe and planet to planet and time to time, just to figure out which choice of law and what law controls would probably take more time than anything. So a nice little simple giving it to arbitration pick a state and that will control kind of thing. But I think you're just waiving all of your rights once you step into the TARDIS.
Then there must be something in the Shadow Proclamation. There's got to be something there. But, I mean, if you're trying to list the risks, I mean, that could be anything from brain cut out and put in Cyberman to turned into tree. I mean, it's a huge, everybody...
I have to spend centuries as a plastic centurion outside of a box. I mean, who would have been able to think of that one?
Yeah, and you're going to be busy for the next 2,000 years. Try not to go insane. That's kind of, yeah. There are a lot of ways you can get killed, maimed, turned into plastic on Doctor Who. So a waiver, I think, would be pretty brutal to write for that reason.
And does the plastic version even have any rights to begin with of the original incarnation of Rory?
Yeah, that's a good one, because you get, would a Cyberman have rights? Because, when you have your brain cut out and put into one of these, and then you remember that you used to be human, what happens then? Are you, in Bad Wolf, where you were having the scum of humanity, or everyone who lost on the reality shows being boiled down into Daleks? How'd that work? So what rights would you still retain? And I don't know, because are you still a person at that point in time? It raises interesting issues of citizenship and humanity, whether if you're an American, if the 14th Amendment still applies to you or not. So it's a fun one. I don't know the answer to it, because I don't think we could, because there's not exactly a lot of case law. But I do think...
you could just simply put a sign on the TARDIS with the other sign saying, if it's an emergency, use the box to call. You can put another sign next to it saying, basically, you forfeit all your rights as you walk through these doors. Yeah. Unilateral contract. You can die violently. Right. Abandon all ye hope, ye who enter this box.
Are you sure you want to do this? Really? Okay. You can turn back now. All right. No? Okay. Welcome aboard.
And he almost gives that warning, the various Doctor Who's, to the companions. They almost always have gotten a chance to go out, to almost like a 3-day clause in a contract where you have 3 days to opt out. There's almost that kind of case. He tends to take them on a little trip, and then they see a little bit of the danger, and then he brings them back, and it's, do you want to stay or do you want to go? That seems to be almost a running theme, and at least into the modern Doctor Who ones.
Definitely with the modern, but not with the first, because with the first companion...
First was a kidnapping.
Yeah, first was a full-blown... Grant, after a home invasion, he then kidnaps them. And
but arguably because it was a relative.
Yeah.
So he might have been the legitimate guardian.
True. But Barbara and Ian were not... it gets really, really messy with that first episode of An Unearthly Child for that reason, because that's full-blown kidnapping. Even though kidnapping in common law said you had to leave the country. Well, if you take people back to the Stone Age, even if you were technically in what would become Great Britain, I think you've left the country because it's not Great Britain yet. So I think that would make it kidnapping at common law. So, but with that, we are in the countdown. We are either, 5 days, so we're in the Peter Davidson countdown to the Doctor 50th anniversary. So let the games begin. I know we will talk about this after the Day of the Doctor, but But I'm looking forward to it, and I'm glad you joined the Doctor Who party. And thank you for your time, and enjoy the rest of it.
You were clearly the reason that I actually got into it to begin with, because you made it sound like it was a fun show. So I thank you for getting me into it.
You're very welcome. And with that, everyone, stay geeky and tune in to the Day of the Doctor on November 23rd.